The pre-dawn darkness hung heavy over Fort Meridian, New Mexico territory, where 17-year-old Patrick O'Brien sat in the military stockade. Shackled to the cold stone wall, through the small barred window, he could see the first pale hints of light touching the eastern horizon, and his heart hammered with the terrible knowledge that sunrise would bring his execution. "They said I'd be shot at dawn," Patrick whispered to himself, his Irish accent still thick despite 3 years in America. The words seemed to echo in the small cell, a death sentence that felt surreal despite the iron shackles that proved its reality. Patrick had been condemned as a deserter and spy, accused of selling information about cavalry troop movements to hostile Apache bands. The evidence against him was circumstantial but damning. He had been found near an Apache camp, carrying maps of military installations, speaking fluent Apache that he had learned during his childhood captivity. But Patrick knew the truth. He hadn't been spying for the Apache. He had been trying to prevent a massacre. The sound of boots on stone announced the arrival of his guard, Sergeant McKenna, a grizzled veteran whose weathered face showed no emotion as he approached the cell. "Time to get ready, boy," McKenna said gruffly, producing a set of keys. "Colonel wants to see you before." Before. Patrick stood on unsteady legs, the shackles clanking as he moved. "Sergeant, I know you don't believe me, but I'm innocent. I was trying to warn the Apache women and children to flee before the cavalry attacked their peaceful camp." McKenna's expression didn't change, but Patrick caught a flicker of something, doubt perhaps, in the older man's eyes. "Boy, innocent or guilty, it's not my place to judge. I follow orders." As they walked through the pre-dawn corridors of the fort, Patrick's mind raced with memories of how he had come to this desperate situation. 3 days ago, he had overheard Colonel Vance discussing plans for a surprise attack on a peaceful Apache village, an attack that would kill innocent women and children along with the warriors. Patrick's conscience had rebelled against such brutality, having lived among the Apache as a child after his parents were killed in a raid. He knew these people as individuals, not faceless enemies. He had tried to warn them, but he had been caught by a cavalry patrol and branded a traitor. "Colonel Vance is waiting," McKenna said as they approached the commanding officer's quarters. Colonel Vance was a thin, cruel man whose hatred of all Native Americans was well known throughout the territory. He looked up from his desk with cold satisfaction as Patrick was brought before him. "Well, O'Brien," Vance said with a sneer, "ready to meet your maker? Any last words before we put you in front of the firing squad?" Patrick straightened his shoulders, determined to face his death with dignity. "Yes, sir. I want it on record that I am innocent of the charges against me. I never betrayed the United States Army. I was trying to prevent the murder of innocent people." Vance's face darkened with anger. "Innocent people. Those Apache savages are all guilty of crimes against civilization. Every man, woman, and child of them." "No, sir," Patrick said firmly. "Children are innocent regardless of their race, and the camp I tried to warn was full of women, children, and old men. They posed no threat to anyone. Your Apache-loving sympathies are exactly why you deserve to die," Vance snarled. "Sergeant McKenna, take this traitor to the courtyard. Dawn is approaching." As they walked toward what would be Patrick's final destination, McKenna spoke quietly. "Boy, for what it's worth, I've seen real traitors. You don't have the look of one." "Thank you, Sergeant," Patrick replied. "That means more than you know." The execution courtyard was a small, walled area behind the main fort buildings. A wooden post had been set up against the far wall, with iron rings for securing the condemned prisoner. Patrick's legs felt weak as he saw the 6 soldiers already assembled with their rifles, their faces grim in the pale morning light. "Any blindfold, son?" McKenna asked quietly. "No, sir," Patrick replied. "I want to see the sunrise one last time." As McKenna began to secure Patrick to the post, the sound of galloping hooves echoed from beyond the fort walls. Someone was approaching at high speed, their horses' hooves thundering against the hard-packed earth. "What the devil?" Colonel Vance muttered, looking toward the sound. The hoofbeats grew louder, and Patrick could hear shouting from the sentries at the main gate. Whatever was happening outside, it was causing quite a commotion. Sergeant McKenna, Vance called out irritably. Ignore whatever disturbance is happening out there. We have an execution to complete. But McKenna hesitated, his experienced ear recognizing something in the approaching sounds that suggested more than just a routine arrival. The massive wooden gates of the fort suddenly burst open, and a lone rider galloped into the courtyard. At full speed, Patrick's heart leaped as he recognized the newcomer, Captain James Sullivan, the most respected officer in the Territorial Army, a man known for his integrity and his fair treatment of both soldiers and Native Americans. "Stop!" Captain Sullivan shouted, dismounting from his lathered horse in one fluid motion. "By order of Territorial Command, this execution is hereby suspended." Colonel Vance's face turned purple with rage. "Captain Sullivan, you have no authority. Here, this man is under my command, and he will be executed as ordered." "Actually, Colonel," Sullivan replied calmly, producing an official document from his saddlebag. "I have direct orders from General Martinez to investigate irregularities in this case. Patrick O'Brien is not to be harmed until a full review has been completed." Patrick felt a surge of hope as Captain Sullivan approached him. Sullivan was known as a fair man, someone who actually investigated the facts before making judgments. "Captain," Patrick said desperately, "I can prove my innocence if you'll just listen to my story." "I intend to do exactly that," Sullivan replied, then turned to face the furious Colonel Vance. "Colonel, I'm placing Private O'Brien under protective custody pending investigation. This is outrageous," Vance sputtered. "That boy is a confirmed deserter and spy. The evidence against him is overwhelming." "What evidence?" Sullivan asked calmly. "A boy found near an Apache camp, maps in his possession, the ability to speak Apache. None of that proves espionage, Colonel." As the sun continued to rise, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Patrick realized that his execution had been postponed, but not necessarily canceled. Everything would depend on Captain Sullivan's investigation, and whether the truth could overcome Colonel Vance's determination to see him dead. "Captain Sullivan," Patrick said earnestly, "I have information about planned attacks on peaceful Apache villages, attacks that would violate every treaty we've signed and bring dishonor on the Army." Sullivan's eyes sharpened with interest. "What kind of attacks?" "Colonel Vance has been planning to massacre non-combatant villages, killing women and children along with warriors. I tried to warn them because I couldn't stand by and watch innocent people die." Vance drew his sidearm, his face twisted with rage. "Enough of these lies. I'll execute this traitor myself." But Captain Sullivan was faster. His own weapon appeared in his hand before Vance could clear leather, and suddenly the courtyard was filled with tension as two officers faced off over the life of one young soldier. "Colonel," Sullivan said quietly, "I suggest you holster that weapon before you do something that ends your career, and possibly your life." The standoff lasted for several heartbeats before Vance reluctantly holstered his gun, his face still flushed with anger and humiliation. "Patrick O'Brien," Sullivan announced formally, "you are hereby remanded to my custody for investigation. Sergeant McKenna, please remove those shackles." As the iron bonds fell away from Patrick's wrists, he felt as if he could breathe again for the first time in days. But he also knew that his ordeal was far from over. Colonel Vance would not give up easily, and there were powerful forces in the territory who supported his harsh policies toward Native Americans. "Captain," Patrick said quietly, "thank you for giving me a chance to prove my innocence. But you should know that Colonel Vance has allies who won't appreciate your interference." Sullivan smiled grimly. "Son, I've been fighting corruption and injustice in this territory for 15 years. A few corrupt officers don't scare me. Subscribe to our channel to see what happens next. Will Captain Sullivan be able to uncover the truth about Patrick's innocence? What dark secrets will emerge about Colonel Vance's planned massacres? Don't miss the explosive next chapter where justice battles corruption in the Territorial Army. Captain James Sullivan's investigation into Patrick O'Brien's case began immediately, and what he discovered in the first few hours shocked even his experienced sensibilities. The more he dug into the evidence against Patrick, the more it became clear that someone had gone to great lengths to frame an innocent young man. "Patrick," Sullivan said as they sat in his temporary office, I want you to tell me everything. From the beginning. Leave nothing out." Patrick took a deep breath and began his story. "Captain, 3 years ago, when I was 14, my family's wagon train was attacked by Apache raiders. My parents were killed, but I was taken captive because I was young enough to adapt to their ways." Sullivan listened intently, taking careful notes as Patrick continued. "I lived with Chief Running Wolf's band for 8 months. They weren't cruel to me, Captain. They treated me like family, taught me their language, their customs. When a cavalry patrol finally found me, I had learned to see them as people, not just enemies." "And that's how you learned to speak Apache so fluently?" "Yes, sir. But more than that, I learned to respect their culture, to understand that most of them just want to live in peace and raise their children safely." Captain Sullivan nodded thoughtfully. "Go on." "When I rejoined white society and eventually enlisted in the Army, I tried to use my knowledge of Apache language and customs to help broker peace treaties. I've served as a translator in several negotiations, which would explain why you have maps of military installations," Sullivan observed. "You would need those for your translation duties." "Exactly, sir. But 3 days ago, I overheard Colonel Vance and some of his officers planning something terrible." Patrick's voice grew heavy with emotion as he described the conversation he had witnessed, detailing Colonel Vance's plan to attack peaceful Apache villages under the pretense of pursuing hostile raiders. He called it clearing out the nests. Patrick said with disgust, he wanted to kill everyone, even the children, to send a message to other Apache bands. Sullivan's face darkened with anger. "That would be a clear violation of our treaty obligations and basic military ethics. I couldn't let it happen, Captain. I tried to warn the villages, but I was caught by a patrol before I could reach them all. And Vance branded you a spy to cover up his own planned war crimes." Sullivan concluded grimly. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Sergeant McKenna entered, his weathered face showing concern. "Captain Sullivan, sir, I thought you should know that Colonel Vance has been sending telegrams to Territorial Command, claiming that you're interfering with military justice." Sullivan wasn't surprised. "Any responses?" "Yes, sir. General Martinez wants to see you immediately. He's arriving by train this afternoon." Patrick felt his heart sink. General Martinez was known as a hard man who supported aggressive action against Native American tribes. If he sided with Colonel Vance, Patrick's reprieve would be short-lived. "Captain," Patrick said quietly, "if the general orders my execution to proceed, I want you to know that I don't regret trying to save those innocent people. Some things are worth dying for." Sullivan stood up, his jaw set with determination. "Patrick, nobody's dying today if I can help it." "Sergeant McKenna, I want you to gather any soldiers who might have witnessed Colonel Vance's planning sessions. We need testimony about what he was really planning over the next few hours." Sullivan conducted a thorough investigation that revealed disturbing patterns in Colonel Vance's command. Several soldiers came forward with reports of the colonel's extreme hatred toward all Native Americans and his plans for unauthorized attacks on peaceful villages. Most importantly, Sullivan discovered that the evidence against Patrick had been manufactured. The maps found in Patrick's possession had been planted there by one of Vance's subordinates, who broke down under questioning and confessed to the frame-up. "Why did you do it?" Sullivan asked the trembling corporal who had planted the evidence. "Colonel, Vance said the boy was a threat to military security." The man replied, "Said his Apache sympathies made him dangerous. The colonel promised me a promotion if I helped eliminate the problem." By the time General Martinez arrived at Fort Meridian, Sullivan had assembled a comprehensive file documenting not only Patrick's innocence, but Colonel Vance's pattern of illegal activities and abuse of authority. General Martinez was a stern man in his 60s, with gray hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see through any deception. He listened without comment as Sullivan presented his findings, occasionally asking pointed questions that demonstrated his understanding of military law and procedure. "Captain Sullivan," General Martinez said when the presentation was complete, "these are serious allegations against a senior officer. Are you prepared to stake your career on the accuracy of this investigation?" "Yes, sir." Sullivan replied without hesitation. "The evidence is overwhelming. Colonel Vance framed an innocent soldier to cover up his own planned war crimes." General Martinez turned his attention to Patrick, studying the young man with the intensity of someone who had spent decades evaluating the character of soldiers. "Private O'Brien," the general said formally, "you stand accused of desertion and espionage. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, sir," Patrick replied firmly. "I never betrayed my country or my fellow soldiers. I tried to prevent atrocities that would have dishonored the entire army. And you were willing to risk your life to warn people you considered enemies?" Patrick met the general's gaze steadily. "Sir, they weren't enemies. They were innocent families who posed no threat to anyone. I couldn't stand by and watch children be murdered." General Martinez was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing everything he had heard. Finally, he turned to Colonel Vance, who had been growing increasingly agitated throughout the proceedings. "Colonel Vance," General Martinez said coldly, "you are hereby relieved of command and placed under arrest for conspiracy, abuse of authority, and planning unauthorized military actions against civilian populations." Vance's face turned purple with rage. "This is outrageous. You're taking the word of a traitor and an Apache lover over a decorated officer." "I'm taking the word of multiple witnesses, documented evidence, and my own assessment of character." General Martinez replied firmly. "Captain Sullivan, place Colonel Vance under arrest." As Vance was led away in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence, General Martinez turned back to Patrick with an expression that had softened slightly. "Private O'Brien, you are hereby cleared of all charges. Furthermore, you are to be commended for your moral courage in attempting to prevent the massacre of innocent civilians." Patrick felt his knees go weak with relief. "Thank you, sir. Thank you for listening to the truth." "Don't thank me yet," General Martinez said with a slight smile. "I have a proposition for you. Sir, the Army needs men with your linguistic skills and cultural knowledge to help establish lasting peace with Apache tribes. Would you be interested in serving as a special liaison, helping to build bridges between our peoples?" Patrick's eyes lit up with excitement. "Yes, sir. That's exactly what I've always wanted to do." Captain Sullivan clapped Patrick on the shoulder. "Congratulations, son. You've not only saved your own life, but you've probably saved the lives of countless innocent people." That evening, as Patrick sat with Captain Sullivan watching the sunset from the fort's walls, he reflected on how close he had come to death and how dramatically his life had changed in just a few hours. "Captain," Patrick said quietly, "I'll never forget that you risked your career to save me." "How can I ever repay you?" Sullivan smiled, thinking of all the young soldiers he had mentored over the years. "Patrick, the best way to repay me is to use your new position to prevent the kind of injustices that almost cost you your life. Help build a future where people are judged by their actions, not their heritage." "I will, sir," Patrick promised. "I'll spend my life building bridges instead of walls." Subscribe to our channel to see the powerful conclusion. How will Patrick use his new role to prevent future conflicts? What happens when he returns to the Apache tribes as an official army liaison? Don't miss the final chapter that shows how one person's courage to do what's right can change the course of history. 2 years had passed since that dawn when Patrick O'Brien had faced a firing squad for crimes he didn't commit, and his life had been transformed beyond anything he could have imagined. Now 19 and bearing the rank of sergeant, Patrick had become the most successful Army liaison to Apache tribes in the Southwest, credited with negotiating 3 major peace treaties and preventing dozens of potential conflicts. But his greatest challenge was yet to come. "Sergeant O'Brien," General Martinez said as Patrick entered his office at Territorial Headquarters in Santa Fe, "we have a crisis situation developing near the Mexican border. Hostile Apache bands have been raiding settlements, and there's pressure from Washington to launch a major military offensive." Patrick studied the map on the general's desk, noting the locations of recent raids and the positions of various Apache bands. "Sir, what kind of pressure are we talking about?" "The worst kind," General Martinez replied grimly. "Political pressure. The newspapers back east are calling for decisive action. And some officials want to authorize the same kind of total warfare that Colonel Vance was planning. Patrick felt his stomach clench with familiar dread. You mean attacking civilian populations? Exactly. Unless we can find a peaceful solution quickly, I'll be ordered to implement a campaign of total warfare against all Apache bands in the region, hostile or peaceful. How long do we have? 2 weeks. If the raids don't stop and the hostile bands don't surrender by then, the orders will come down from Washington to end this conflict permanently. Patrick looked at the map again, his mind racing with possibilities. Sir, I know some of these band leaders. Chief Running Wolf's son, Thundercloud, leads one of the groups that's been labeled hostile. But I know Thundercloud. He's not a killer of innocents. Then why is his band being blamed for the raids? Because it's convenient. Patrick replied with growing understanding. Sir, what if the real raiders are renegades who are being protected by corrupt officials? What if someone is deliberately stirring up conflict to justify a profitable war? General Martinez leaned back in his chair, his experienced eyes showing interest. Explain. Think about it, sir. Who profits from an Apache war? Weapons manufacturers, supply contractors, politicians who can claim they're being tough on the Indian problem. There are people who have a financial interest in preventing peace. And you think they might be orchestrating these raids? It's possible, sir. Some of the attacks don't match Apache tactics. They're too brutal, too random. Real Apache warriors have honor codes that prevent certain kinds of violence. General Martinez stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the bustling streets of Santa Fe. Sergeant O'Brien, I'm going to give you those 2 weeks to prove your theory. If you can identify the real perpetrators and stop the raids, we might prevent a catastrophic war. And if I can't, then I'll have no choice but to follow orders and launch a campaign that could destroy every Apache band in the territory. Patrick left Santa Fe that afternoon, riding hard toward the border region where the raids had been occurring. His first stop was the hidden canyon where Chief Running Wolf's band had established their current camp, the same peaceful group he had tried to warn 2 years earlier. Patrick called out a familiar voice as he approached the camp. Thundercloud, now 25 and bearing the scars of many battles, embraced him like a brother. It is good to see you, my friend. Thundercloud, Patrick replied in fluent Apache. I come with urgent news. The Army plans to attack all Apache bands if the border raids don't stop. Thundercloud's expression grew dark. We are not responsible for those raids, brother. Our warriors have been in this canyon for weeks, hunting and caring for our families. I believe you, Patrick said firmly. But someone is committing these attacks using Apache weapons and tactics. Do you have any idea who? Thundercloud was quiet for a moment, clearly wrestling with some difficult knowledge. There are rumors, he said finally, of white men dressed as Apache, carrying out attacks to blame on our people. White men? Who would do such a thing? Men who work for the one you call Colonel Morrison, the new military supplier for the territory. We have seen his wagons moving near the border, always just before raids occur. Patrick felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Colonel Morrison was the arms dealer who had taken over military supply contracts after Colonel Vance's arrest. If Morrison was orchestrating fake Apache raids, he would profit enormously from the resulting war. Thundercloud, I need proof. Can your scouts help me track these false raiders? Yes, brother, but it will be dangerous if they discover you know their secret. They will try to kill you. Over the next week, Patrick and a team of Apache scouts conducted a careful investigation of the border region. What they discovered was even worse than Patrick had suspected. Colonel Morrison had assembled a group of renegade whites and hostile Apache outcasts, arming them and directing them to attack settlements in ways that would inflame anti-Apache sentiment. There whispered Spotted Eagle, one of the Apache scouts, pointing toward a hidden camp in a box canyon. The false raiders gather there before their attacks. Patrick studied the camp through his spyglass, counting at least 20 men, most of them white, all heavily armed with military weapons. We need to get closer, gather evidence that will convince General Martinez. That night, Patrick and Spotted Eagle crept close enough to overhear conversations that confirmed their worst suspicions. Morrison was indeed orchestrating the raids, planning to escalate them until the army had no choice but to launch total war against all Apache bands. The next attack will be on the mission school at San Rafael, they heard Morrison tell his men. Kill everyone, especially the children. Make it look like savage Apache work. That should be enough to trigger the war we need. Patrick felt his blood run cold. San Rafael was home to dozens of innocent children, both Apache and white, who were learning to read and write in a peaceful mission school. Morrison was planning to massacre children. To start a profitable war, we have to stop them, Patrick whispered to Spotted Eagle. There are too many of them for just us, the Apache scout replied. We need help. Patrick made a desperate decision. Ride to Thunder Cloud's camp. Tell him what we've discovered. Ask him to gather warriors who will fight to protect innocent children, regardless of their race. And you? I'm riding to Fort Meridian to warn General Martinez. If we can coordinate our efforts, we might be able to stop this massacre and expose Morrison's conspiracy. The race against time that followed was the most desperate of Patrick's young life. He rode through the night to reach Fort Meridian, nearly killing his horse in his urgency to warn General Martinez about the planned attack on San Rafael. General, Patrick gasped as he burst into Martinez's office at dawn. Morrison is behind the raids. He's planning to massacre the mission school today to trigger a war. General Martinez listened grimly as Patrick explained everything he had discovered. Do you have proof? I have testimony from Apache witnesses and my own observations. But more importantly, sir, I know where Morrison's men are and when they plan to attack. How many men does he have? About 20, sir, but I've arranged for Thunder Cloud's warriors to help us stop them, Apache and Army, fighting together to protect innocent children. General Martinez smiled grimly. Sergeant O'Brien, saddle up. We're going to stop a massacre and end a conspiracy. The battle at San Rafael was brief but decisive. Morrison's raiders, expecting to find helpless victims, instead encountered a combined force of cavalry soldiers and Apache warriors fighting side by side. To protect the mission school, Morrison himself was captured alive and under interrogation. He confessed to the entire conspiracy, implicating several other officials who had been profiting from prolonged conflict between the Army and Apache tribes. 6 months later, Patrick stood in the same courtyard at Fort Meridian where he had once faced execution. But this time, he was receiving the Medal of Honor for his role in exposing the conspiracy and preventing a catastrophic war. Sergeant Patrick O'Brien, General Martinez announced to the assembled crowd, "Your courage and integrity have saved countless innocent lives and brought lasting peace to this territory." As the ceremony concluded, Patrick was approached by Thunder Cloud, who had also been honored for his role in protecting the mission school. "Brother," Thunder Cloud said with a smile, "you have proven that some white men can be trusted to keep their word and protect the innocent. And you have proven that Apache and white can fight together when we share common values." Patrick replied, "Maybe that's the real victory here." Years later, Patrick O'Brien would become the first territorial representative for Native American affairs, helping to establish schools, hospitals, and economic opportunities for Apache families throughout the Southwest. The mission school at San Rafael would become a model for integrated education, where Apache and white children learned together in an atmosphere of mutual respect. But for Patrick, the most important legacy of that terrible dawn when he had faced execution was simpler: the knowledge that doing what's right, even when it costs everything, can change not just individual lives, but the course of history itself. The false dawn that had nearly seen his death had given way to a true dawn of understanding and cooperation between peoples who had once seen each other only as enemies. And the young man who had once whispered in terror about being shot at dawn had become a bridge between worlds, proving that courage and integrity could triumph over hatred and greed. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories from the American frontier. This incredible tale of Patrick and Thunder Cloud shows us that true heroism lies not in victory over enemies, but in the courage to see the humanity in others and fight for justice, regardless of the personal cost. Hit that subscribe button and Ring the notification bell to join us for more emotional journeys that prove how one person's refusal to stay silent in the face of injustice can prevent tragedies and build bridges between divided peoples. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that the dawn always comes, even after the darkest night.